Hey, work from homers, Adam Schroeder here. We love bringing you this podcast, and thousands of you have proven that it's been helpful for you. But since time and online storage space aren't free, Naresh and I wanted to come to you personally to ask for your financial support through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/workfromhomeshow and help support the show. And we appreciate your support at any amount you choose. That's patreon.com/workfromhomeshow. Thanks for your support. Let's get to the show.
Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh Vissa with Adam Schroeder. Today we have an awesome guest with you, Dr. Jud Brewer. He's a founder of MindSciences, now known as DrJud. It's an app-based digital therapeutic treatment program for anxiety, overeating, and smoking. He is a director of research and innovation at Brown University's Mindfulness Center and associate professor in behavioral and social sciences in the Brown School of Public Health, as well as in psychiatry at Brown's Warren Alpert Medical School. He is an executive medical director of behavioral health at the digital health company Sharecare and #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Craving Mind, From Cigarettes to Smartphones to Love, Why We Get Hooked and How We Can Break Bad Habits. Definitely going to talk about that book. But also his new book, Unwinding Anxiety. New science shows how to break the cycles of worry and fear to heal your mind. Very relevant topics to this post-pandemic world that we now live in. Dr. Jud Brewer, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I want to start with your first book, The Craving Mind, because it's about breaking bad habits. And this is something that I've been working on, not with myself, but with my 14-month-old son, who developed a lot of bad habits when he had some caretakers taking care of him. And then now he has his parents taking care of him. And I'd say, you know, for babies, toddlers, it's pretty quick to break bad habits. It's like 2 or 3 days and they're good. In the case of sleeping, in the case of like a pacifier or binky, it takes a few weeks, but pretty fine overall. How about for grown adults like me? I'm in my 30s, Adam's a millennial. How long does it take to break the bad habits, and what tips do you have for breaking these bad habits?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's no magic formula. There's a lot out on the internet that most of it's not true. So the first thing I would say is make sure you get accurate information. Yeah, I know. So it really depends on what the habit is, and it depends on the person. So what I do know, and what we do know scientifically, is that our brains form habits based on how rewarding a behavior is. And because of that, we can also tap into that same system to help break bad habits. So if we've had a bad habit for years and years and years and years, it can be ingrained, yet our brain is pretty plastic and we can unlearn it pretty quickly. And the key to that is really tapping into that reward value piece. Basically, you know, something's still rewarding if we do it either habitually and we're not paying attention to how rewarding it is, or it continues to provide reward for us, we're going to keep doing it. If it's no longer rewarding, maybe we started eating cake, for example, when we were 5, and we've now just habitually, you know, we see cake, we eat cake. That can be harder to break until we bring awareness in. But this is one thing that my lab's been studying, is how quickly can we do this? And it takes 10 to 15 times of somebody really carefully paying attention as somebody is, say, overeating, to start to drive that reward value below 0, where they start switching the behavior from overeating to not overeating. We can even embed tools into app-based mindfulness training programs to map this out specifically.
Well, talking about habits again, there's a book by Yuval Harari. I don't know if you've heard of him, well-known author. And he talks, I don't remember the book name, but he says that according to his research, it takes, I think it was like 3 weeks, like 21 days or 23 days, somewhere in the 20s, to get rid of a bad habit and to implement a new habit. So do you have any, and 23 days intense intense, like, for example, I used to eat meat, and in 2010, I said, you know what, I'm going to give it up. And I had to fight it. And it didn't take 23 days because I cheated. And it ended up taking about, I would say, 4 or 5 months to get over that habit of eating meat. But according to him, if I really stuck with it and didn't cheat, it would have taken like 23 days. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, what I would have to say is there's the most commonly quoted number is 21 days, so 3 weeks. And that actually comes from a plastic surgeon that wrote a book in the 1960s suggesting that it took about 3 weeks for his patients to get used to their nose jobs. I wouldn't say that actually applies to people beyond people that get plastic surgery for their nose, unless somebody's actually done a study to prove that. And when I wrote this new book, Unwinding Anxiety, I actually went back and chased down that meme to see where that came from, because so many people have been writing about it. And in fact, the closest I could find, so I'm a scientist, so I look for scientific papers that are peer-reviewed. And there was a study that I quote in my book where people did this modeling, where they found that, they tried to fit people's behavior change into this mathematical model. Not everybody, the fit was not great for most people. It's hard to fit people into a mathematical algorithm. And in fact, it was even in their model fit, it was much longer than 21 days that they were estimating that it took people to do this. So that's why we went and did our own research, my lab, where we could actually collect data for ourselves and analyze it. And this is where we found, that the time period is less important than, it's not the quantity, it's the quality. And so how we spend our time. If somebody really carefully pays attention, in that moment, they're updating that reward value in their brain, and we can show that those values change, and it really depends on the person and what they're doing, and ultimately it comes down to awareness. I'll give you a concrete example. So in my clinic, people come in, they want to quit smoking. I had a guy who had been smoking 40 years, so we had calculated that he'd been reinforcing the smoking habit loop for 293,000 times. Okay. So a long time. Yet when I had him really carefully pay attention to smoking a cigarette, in that moment, he realized, and most of my patients realize this, that cigarettes taste like crap. And so that reward value already started getting updated in his brain. And people can, if they pay attention to every cigarette they smoke, then they're very carefully attentive to that reward value can drop pretty quickly. Again, we'd seen 10 to 15 times of people we have this craving tool that we can use to measure this. We embed this in our Craving to Quit app. We embed this into our Eat Right Now app, and we can measure this change in reward value. So it's times, number of times that people pay attention that updates the reward value, not just a magic number like 21 days or 23 days.
So what are the recommendations to people, like, let's say you want to cut out, there's a whole lot of people trying to cut down on the amount of sugar they're eating, or people who are starting to work from home and they find that they're snacking a lot during the day. Not necessarily like overeating to the point where they're stuffed, but, maybe they're starting to gain weight because they're snacking or, they're not eating as healthy. But they still, while they're snacking, they're eating a cupcake or chips or whatever. And there's not like the whole, it doesn't taste like crap like cigarettes do. And it's not like they're eating till they're miserable. So, if there's still some enjoyment, but you just don't want to do it, how does a person go about kind of breaking those kind of habits?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So that we don't need to smoke to survive, but we do need to eat to survive. So calories are something that our brain really pays attention to. So here I would say two things. One is, can we look at the root cause of what's driving us to eat? So if we're not hungry, there's something else driving us to eat because it's not physiologic hunger. It might be boredom. It might just be that we're starting to develop the habit of snacking while we're working on a stressful assignment for work. It could be a number of different things. So really just checking in with ourselves to see, what is it that's driving me to eat? Can I actually address the root cause of the issue instead of just putting Band-Aids on it by eating? The second thing is, if we've noticed that we've started to develop a habit of eating when we're not hungry, we can pay attention with each bite. And I have people pay attention to and ask the simple question, is this bite more rewarding, less rewarding or the same amount of reward as the last bite, so they can really carefully pay attention and see, when is enough. So I had somebody in one of our studies who called her my 2 potato chip lady. So as she paid attention, she realized she could stop with 2 potato chips and she was done. And so this doesn't mean we're going to suddenly magically stop eating chocolate or stop eating potato chips, but it can certainly help us see when we're finished. And 2 potato chips is certainly for her a lot better than eating the whole bag and then having to figure out how to lose all that weight.
Yeah, definitely. Now, is this something that people are like writing down and taking notes and kind of making it sink in that way? Or is this all just kind of keeping track of it in your head?
It depends on the person. So we actually put together a habit mapper anybody can download for free from mapmyhabit.com, where people can just start mapping out the process. A lot of people like to write it down on paper. That's why we created this PDF where people can print it out and they can start mapping out all the different habits throughout the day. That's the really good place to start.
Yeah, and now talking a little bit about your new book, which is Unwinding Anxiety. New science shows how to break the cycles of worry and fear to heal your mind. I think very relevant to the economic recession. Regardless of what the numbers say, it's not a good economy. There's still a lot of lockdowns. Businesses aren't coming back. Small businesses have been shut down. So let's talk about this book a little bit. Let's start with when you started writing it. Was it during the pandemic, or what was it before? And apply it so that our listeners can take away good nuggets of information.
So there was this BC, so before COVID-19, which probably seems like forever ago, there were lots of people with anxiety, and anxiety was actually on the rise. So after years of doing this research and seeing how this was helping for my patients, I started writing the book back in December 2019, before COVID was even on the world scene, or even I didn't know anything about it. And I just added a few chapters with some of the statistic of how bad anxiety has gotten over the last year when I finished the book. So I really put it together as a pragmatic tool for people to start learning how their own mind worked and how they could break their own cycles of anxiety and other habits related to it.
So one of the things I think people just have access to too much information, which is a big part of our anxiety.
Yes.
Like you look at like even just parenting nowadays. I mean, back whenever I was growing up, it seems, my parents did their best, but, they weren't looking at like a Facebook or an Instagram and seeing, oh, this parent's doing this, cool thing, and this parent's doing this cool thing. I'm not doing those. I'm terrible. But it's so hard to not look at that stuff nowadays. So what can we do to make ourselves less anxious, even though we have all these things showing us the wonderful people we're supposed to be in the world today?
Right. So you're highlighting some of these aspects of social media, where social media can help us spread information, which can be helpful, but it can also help. Yes, it is. So it's like designed to pull our attention in this attention economy. And at the same time, there's all this fear of missing out, or feeling like, oh, I need to get all the information. Well, it's like drinking from a fire hose. We just can't possibly get all that information. And ironically, trying to get all the information makes us anxious, which makes our thinking and planning brain go offline, so we can't actually implement it. So here I would say it comes back to understanding and knowing our own minds. If we can see what information we're going for, what do I need to know, and what sources of information we're going for. When I go on a certain social media site, does it make me more anxious because I feel like I'm missing out or not having information, or does it make me more confused? Versus, is there a site that's really helpful? And we can then learn to moderate our information consumption so that we get enough, but we're not trying to overconsume, which is in fact defeating the whole purpose.
Yeah, I found even just like buying a simple thing like, a new pillow even can get to the point, there's so many things out there like you were talking about that eventually I just had to, I had this discussion with my wife a few months ago whenever I don't remember what I was trying to buy. And eventually I just told her, you know what, I'm just going to buy it. It looks good. It may not be the absolute best thing, but I'm just going to buy it because otherwise I'm just going to sit here and stare at it forever. And she's like, I don't know how you can do that. I have to read everything. And I'm just like, no, I'm going to buy it and it's either going to be good or it's not. And if it's not good, I'll just return it.
Right. It's like we have to go on Consumer Reports to look up, which paper napkins are the best ones.
Well, but then you have to read your Google
napkins.
reviews, but then Google may not be good enough, so I need to read this other site too and compare the reviews and make sure they're not fake reviews. I mean, it's just So anyway, I just had to end up buying.
We needed to get pillows also in our outdoor patio. And that's why I told my wife I had a credit to Home Depot. It was like a $350 credit because they don't give you refunds. And I said, look, we need to buy this furniture. Instead of you going on the internet and looking all this stuff up and shopping at a bunch of different stores, we are going to Home Depot and we are leaving Home Depot with the pillows that we need. And so much easier. Anyways, Dr. Brewer, what brain-based techniques and small hacks are accessible to anyone when it comes to dealing with their anxiety or changing their behavior or habits in general?
Well, the first hack that we've already talked about is just mapping out these habit loops and just illuminating our awareness of how our minds work. That's actually a critical and, not only essential, but a really helpful first step. It might seem small, but without that, we can't move forward. The next step is really helping our brains see very, very clearly how rewarding or unrewarding whatever the habit is that we're trying to break, as well as whatever habit is that we're trying to make. So, for example, for overeating, we talked about stress eating, paying attention with each bite. What am I getting from this? Asking that simple question. If we're worrying, we can ask, is this worrying solving the problem, keeping my family safe, or whatever it's quote unquote supposed to be doing, to see how well it works. Typically, worrying only makes it harder for us to think and plan. Is this the right pillow? That's not going to help us actually figure out what the right pillow is. So that helps our reward value update in our brain so that we're really seeing clearly how rewarding that behavior is. And from there, the third step is to bring in what I call the BBO, the bigger, better offer. And here, I love these simple tools that we can tap into that are intrinsic, such as curiosity and kindness. And I talk a lot about techniques we can use to develop these in the book. But basically, when you think of anxiety, it feels closed and contracted. When you think of curiosity, it feels open and expanded. And you can't be closed and open at the same time. They're binary opposites. So if you inject curiosity in, even in that second step where you're asking, what am I getting from this? You're already starting to unwind that anxiety or whatever the other habit loop is.
Yeah, I have to say it's kind of serendipitous that we're doing this interview today because I was making my lunch. My kids had left a bag of chips open and I just walked up and absentmindedly reached in and had a chip or two, and then I realized, what am I doing? I don't even really want these right now. And I just had to close the bag up and then put it away. Now, your app, the DrJud app, there's so many apps out there in the space today. What separates your app from, a Weight Watchers for overeating or any other app that's supposed to help ease your anxiety or, cravings?
Here I would say, we have three different ones. One's called Craving to Quit. That's for smoking. One's called Eat Right Now, which is for helping people not overeat or not stress eat. And then the Unwinding Anxiety app, same name as the book, is really geared toward helping people with anxiety. And the bottom line here is there are a ton of apps out there. There's very, very little evidence that supports any of these. It's less than 0.5% that actually have scientific data behind them. We start with science. So we start with scientific theory. We design based on, those theories. And then my lab does studies to see if these things work. We've linked up, we got a 40% reduction in craving-related eating with our Eat Right Now app. We got a 67% reduction in clinically validated anxiety scores in people with generalized anxiety disorder in one of our randomized controlled trials for the Unwinding Anxiety app. We even linked up brain mechanisms with smoking, and reduction in cigarette smoking with our Craving to Quit app. So the big thing that we focus on is science.
That's good to hear. Do you have any other mobile apps, or is this the only one that you're focusing on?
Those three apps, and they're, we separate them out so that people can really focus.
Can you share those three again and
Sure.
their websites?
Unwinding Anxiety, which is just unwindinganxiety.com. The Eat Right Now app is goeatrightnow.com. And then the Craving to Quit app is cravingtoquit.com. But you can find all of those through the DrJud.com website.
Gotcha. And then there's also, I just want to plug these, mapmyhabit.com and then DrJud.com, like you said. And then you're also you're the executive medical director at the digital health company Sharecare. That's sharecare.com. Can you tell us a little bit about Sharecare and how they help people?
Well, they're really trying to help people bring all of, they're looking very forward at the, what's the best way to help with health. And digital health is certainly not just an emerging, but going to be an essential aspect of healthcare in the future. And so what they're doing is they're bringing together all the tools to help people have all of their digital health in one place. And so it brings together, insurers, payers, employers, and individuals so that everybody can have all of that in one place in an accessible and usable manner.
What do you see has spurred people to make the change to actually, start taking your science-backed approach rather than people trying to do it themselves? Do you see there kind of being a common trait that people have when they kind of finally move to a service like yours and kind of your approach?
Often it's because everything else has failed for them. So, we haven't done a lot of advertising, and it's been a lot of word of mouth where people are telling their friends, they're like, wow, I tried everything else and this is the only thing worked for me. Or, I've had anxiety for 30 years and this finally helped me, move out of it. So it's really, guerrilla marketing from people saying, wow, this is the one thing that's taught me how my own mind worked, and I've been able to work with it where nothing else has helped.
Dr. Judson Brewer, founder of MindSciences, now known as DrJud. That's DrJud.com. Thanks so much for coming on the Work From Home show. Any final thoughts that you want to share with our listeners?
I would just say, really remember that we are all the experts of our own experience. And so often we look to, wearables or some, mappers for calorie counters or things like that. And really, it's all there right within our own experience. If we just look at our own experience and we look and tap into our own wisdom, we can do that change. And we're the ones that we can believe more than anybody else. So I would say, trust your own experience as you go through your own journey of, developing new habits and breaking bad ones.
All right. Well, Dr. Brewer, thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody go check him out, DrJud.com. That's DrJud.com. You can also find him at mapmyhabit.com or Sharecare.com. Check us out at workfromhomeshow.com. That's workfromhomeshow.com. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to get to us, that's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. Leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. And until next week, keep on working from home.